In the previous video, we discussed the basics of controllers for web and API, also discussed resource controllers. In this video, we are discussing invokable and singleton controllers. We keep it short and to the point, no lengthy explanations. If you want in-depth Laravel tutorials, check out our Laravel framework series. Let's get started. What are invokable controllers, and when should you use them? An invokable controller is a special type of controller in Laravel that contains only a single action. The action is represented by the invoke magic method. This is useful when you have a simple controller that only needs to handle one route. Say, you have an endpoint for receiving data from a webhook. We can create a simple controller and create an endpoint as a webhook receiver. Or we can create an invokable controller and define a single method, invoke. This will make the implementation simpler, cleaner, and better organized. Use the command php artisan make controller, webhook receiver controller, -- invokable. This will create a controller file. If you check the controller, you will see only one action method named __ invoke it. Let's dump the data that it receives from the webhook. Let's open the web.catchp file from the routes directory. Define the route with endpoint webhook -receiver and with method post. Then pass the controller. Nothing special needs to be done in the case of an invokable controller. We can define a route with any method get, put, post, or delete. Anything. The request will always go to the invoke action method. Let's make a call to the webhook -receiver with post method. Wait, we are getting error 419, and it says page expired. I think this is not related to the controller definition, but this is happening for the CSRF protection. Let's disable that for this endpoint. Go to app.php in the bootstrap directory. In the with middleware call, inside the provided function call, validate the CSRF token from middleware and pass the endpoint as an array to the accept value. It will ignore the CSRF checking for that endpoint. This is not related to the invokable controller. We just did it for our demo purposes. Let's call the endpoint again. Now it works. Use an invokable controller when your controller needs to perform only one action. You want cleaner and more readable code. You want to organize single-purpose logic without cluttering other controllers. In general, we use it in cases like webhook receiver, notification sender, single page view loader, background job trigger. Finally, just remember only one method invoke. Root points to the controller class, not a method. Good for single action controllers. Helps keep code simple and clean. What are singleton controllers and their use cases? Why is this called a singleton controller? This is called a singleton controller because it deals with a single resource. There is only one profile or setting for a logged-in user, and the user will be able to deal with only that setting or profile resource. So there is no need to pass any ID or any other identifier with the URL. The application always knows which setting or profile resource to deal with for that request. Pass -- singleton argument while generating a controller. Let's discuss the routing and actions of singleton controller. We have to define the route using singleton method of route. After this route definition, we get 3 endpoints. If the endpoint is for user profile, then the first route is /profile, HTTP method get. Action method used is the show method, and route name is profile.show. This is used to show information of the profile. The next endpoint is /profile/edit, HTTP method get, route name, profile, edit. It uses action method edit and shows the profile edit form. Notice, There is no UD passed in the endpoint, because it knows that the profile is of the current user. Finally, the update endpoint is used to update the profile data. HTTP method, put or patch, endpoint URL/profile, route name, profile, update. Now, if we call the destroyable method in the route definition, it also adds a destroyable method to the route. This destroy has endpoint, profile, HTTP method, delete. Route name is profile.destroy, and use the destroy action method of the controller. Instead of destroyable, if you use the creatable method, then two creation-related methods are added. First one is /profile/create. This is used to show the profile creation form. HTTP method, get and route name is profile.create. Then the store method with endpoint /profile and uses HTTP method, post. When we use the creatable method, it also adds the destroy method. So we do not need to use the destroyable separately. We have seen what happens with profile when defined as a singleton resource controller. Now, let's check the singleton controller for settings. In the terminal, type PHP artisan make controller setting controller, then -- singleton. Check the generated controller file. You will see some actions already defined. Now define the route. Use route, singleton, then the endpoint, and setting controller class. For the demo, dump something from the action methods. Let's check. We get the value from the show route endpoint. Let's check the post endpoint. It does not work as we have not defined it as creatable. Edit endpoint works. It is showing some error. Let's ignore the CSRF for this, for demo purpose. Now it works. Delete does not work, as we have not made the singleton route as deletable. Call the deletable method on the route. Now the delete endpoint is working, but the post endpoint still does not work. Let's enable it. Call the creatable method. Excellent, it works now. And the delete endpoint also works. We can do the same thing for API routes. Curate a singleton controller for API. For defining an API route as singleton, use route, API singleton. That's it, this will work now. We can make it destroyable or creatable according to our requirement. The singleton routes are predefined, but we can change them if we want to. Use the names method and pass your configuration. There is an important thing that I want to remind you of. There is another term in Laravel named singleton binding. The singleton binding and the singleton resource controller are two different things. We will discuss the service container and binding in detail in the later sections. But let's clarify the difference here. Singleton binding is used to ensure that the service container creates only one singleton resource of a class in a single request lifecycle. So the same object instance is used over the same request lifecycle when we do a singleton binding. For the singleton binding, use the singleton method of the app object. Instead of the bind method, say we want to bind a concrete class to an abstract class or interface, we can use this app singleton, then the abstract class or interface, and then the concrete class. For example, whenever we want to bind a payment gateway abstract class, to a specific payment class, like Stripe, we can use the bind class. But to ensure the same single instance over the request lifecycle, we should use the singleton method. So the term singleton for the singleton resource is used to indicate that this controller deals with a specific single resource. In the next video, we are discussing the tricky questions about controller that are asked in an interview.